Минулого тижня на запрошення престижного Empire-клубу в Торонті посол України Вадим Пристайко представив позицію України відносно порушення Росією міжнародного права в Криму і дальшої військової загрози зі сторони Росії. На цій зустрічі в Empire-клубі виступив також усім відомий бізнесмен Євген Мельник. І про це розповімо в сьогоднішній передачі.
Посла України Вадима Пристайка привітав президент Empire Club Нобл Кумар. Посол України чітко представив своє завдання.
First of all, about Ukraine and what happened in Ukraine after the fall of regime of Mr. Yanukovych, and how Ukraine reset itself on the path to Europe, to European integration, which we're pursuing all our 23 years of our independence. Then, I can just admit, I know that you will see ambassador of my old friend, Ambassador Mamedov, and 22nd of April. I'm not going to argue with him, at least not in one room, but I can admit this issue of what's Russia doing to us, what we have in right now. Somebody believe that what's going on in Ukraine is just threat to the Putin's sort of sovereign democracy he is pursuing and building up in Russia, and as a threat can be forgiven and can be ignored by him. And that everything is going on in Ukraine is just his reaction to the events. That's you to make the opinion on this one. And the third one is the simple one, how the international community is reacting to what is going on in Ukraine and how it's actually hurting the international system which been built over the last 100 of years.
На думку пана Пристайка, агресія Росії – це зрада сусіда і зневага міжнародного права.
We are talking about rewriting the whole international system, proving that there is still a right of stronger, and the nuclear states can do whatever they want to do. I have to remind you that in 1991, Ukraine had on its territory the third biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons. This arsenal was bigger than Chinese, Britain, and France together. So we gave it up, and in return, we've been promised security guarantees from 5 countries. One of these countries invaded Ukrainian territory, and one more country, China, abstained during the voting in the United Nations. So you can now understand how much the cost, the paper on which we signed. If we rephrase the Bismarck's words about the papers on which the agreements with Russia are signed. So that's the reality. We are not protected, we are not a member of any bloc, and we are under occupation of our neighbor.
На іншому рівні агресія Росії – це просто крадіж.
But what they really took a blow is energy security of Ukraine. The gas fields around Crimea and the Black Sea are very important to us, extremely critical important. We estimated around 170 billion cubic meters of natural gas, 47 million tons of oil, and 18 million tons of gas condensate. At the end of 2013, Ukraine developed only 4% of these capacities. And now our companies were producing annually around 6-7 million cubic meters of gas. 1.2 were consumed in Crimea, the rest was exported to mainland Ukraine. Now all of these wells in the hands of Russia. We are talking about gas, but we're also talking about infrastructure. There are some drilling platforms, hundreds of millions of dollars. Worse, we are talking about $1 billion of military equipment, banks, schools, kindergartens, infrastructure, build everything.
Міжнародне суспільство чітко осудило агресію Росії.
We had in United Nations just a couple of days the UN resolution on territorial sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. That's the first time when the international community was so united. We had 100 countries voted for this resolution. We have 11 countries who actually voted against. I'll give you the list. Russia, Belarus, Bolivia, Venezuela, Armenia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Nicaragua, Northern Korea, Sudan, and Syria. That's nations who actually decided to support Mr. Putin in his endeavor. Nobody else.
Особлива подяка від пана Пристайка урядові Канади та українській громаді в Канаді.
Sincerely thank you to the Ukrainian community of Canada. That's probably the most important part. I told this before, I know. It is dramatic part, now it's very tough time. I'm not that sure as my president 2004 was, that from this now it will be much better. I sincerely hope, and with your help, with Canada's help, with our friends around the globe, we will do it. Thank you very much.
Формально подякувати шановному послу запрошено Євгена Мельника.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're now going to hear from Eugene Melnyk, who's going to essentially thank the ambassador, but also provide you with a perspective from a Ukrainian Canadian.
As a Ukrainian Canadian, I grew up surrounded by a tight-knit Ukrainian community. My best friends were and are Ukrainian. I went to Ukrainian school, Ukrainian Scouts. My family priest, Father Terry, who delivered grace, is also Ukrainian. The history of my family is one defined by survival. My parents grew up in a small town called Chernivtsi in western Ukraine. They lived through oppressive times that were a result of the German Nazis and a Soviet dictator named Stalin. My parents also survived the Holodomor, and for those who are unfamiliar with the Holodomor, please allow me to give you a 2-minute history lesson that will astound you. Holodomor is a Ukrainian word, when translated means extermination by hunger. Between 1932 and 33, in just 2 short years, the premeditated actions of one Russian dictator named Joseph Stalin killed 7.5 million Ukrainians. It was a terrible time in Ukrainian history, and one all Ukrainians rightfully and painfully choose never to forget. To put it starkly, the Holodomor was one of the greatest genocides in human history. This historical context of Ukraine is critically important to understand because the people of Ukraine, my parents included, struggled with chronic oppression, first by Stalin, then the Nazis, and now with Putin's regime. Where Mr. Putin is making a colossal mistake is in grossly underestimating the resolve of this generation of young Ukrainians who have known nothing but freedom. Putin chose to invade a neighboring country, use military force to physically and verbally threaten the people of Ukraine, show complete disregard for Ukraine's constitutional rights, and thumb his nose at well-established and well-understood international laws and treaties. Putin's actions are the absolute antithesis of what we teach our children. Simply put, the guy's a bully. Well, congrats to you, Vlad, picking on a defenseless country, ill-prepared to fight you, and just beating up on them. Do you truly believe that you make every Russian proud? When some of Ukraine's high-ranking military officials go missing, we should have no illusions on the type of person we are dealing with. This, ladies and gentlemen, by any standard, is extreme behavior. So extreme that our Prime Minister has categorized Putin's actions as something not seen since World War II. So extreme that both our Prime Minister and Minister John Baird have referred to Russia's occupation of Crimea as being no different than Hitler and the Third Reich's annexation of Czechoslovakia. Ladies and gentlemen, when we have world leaders comparing Putin's behavior and actions in Crimea to Hitler and the Third Reich, we have ourselves a major international crisis. One man, Mr. Putin, holds sole accountability. This man is your penultimate modern-day aggressor. To put it mildly, Mr. Putin is deceptive, corrupt, and an irrational tyrant. Someone who on many levels is single-handedly threatening the geopolitical balance of our world economy. Thankfully, international solidarity against Mr. Putin continues to strengthen daily. And on this point, I do have to thank our Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, John Baird, who both have been assertive and very influential in coordinating the international response to this crisis. The efforts of the international community over this past week alone are the greatest indication to date of the severity of the crisis. We now have all 28 members of NATO organizing themselves to shore up significant military assets for potential deployment. As we move into the next phase of this crisis, we ask of our Canadian government to firstly support the rearming of Ukraine's military through the supply of military hardware. They will repay the debt. They just need the tools. And secondly, support the establishment of a more permanent presence of NATO forces in Baltic states and other nations neighboring Russia. And third, to provide an economic backstop to a country bankrupt by Yanukovych and Putin. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you again for being with us here today. I truly believe that your speaking to us gives everyone a better understanding of what Ukraine is facing. As you rightfully pointed out, Canada is home to 1.2 million Canadians, Ukrainian Canadians. We have the largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world, and with that reality comes a responsibility for us to act and support the people of Ukraine. We will continue to work closely with the Prime Minister and his cabinet to identify as many opportunities as we can to work with you and your government. We are fully committed to doing our part in preserving Ukraine's sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity. And we will not stop until this is achieved. I'd also like at this time to thank all of you for attending and supporting the Empire Club's efforts this afternoon to host the ambassador. Again, thank you very much.